Hey there, this is Tomasino, and this is another video about Gemini. In this case, we're talking about Gemini Input, or Gemini Forms, if you will. I had a request earlier tonight to discuss, here we go, some forms. What is the syntax for a form or input? And I tried to explain a little bit on Mastodon about how there isn't a direct HTML equivalent to Gemini for like form input. It's a little bit simpler and it's a little bit more complex, both. And tonight I'm going to make this quick video to show you how it works. So there are actually two types of input that we can think about as a user using a Gemini site. The normal one, the first one, is what we refer to as type 10, or the response code for input. And the second is a little bit fancier. It's where we use a client certificate. That's the TLS certificate that you build on in your browser, in your client, your Gemini client, that identifies your particular user session. And we can use both of them individually or together to create more rich experiences in Gemini. And let's add a little note here to show one of those at the end. Examples. There we go. Okay, so we talked about the Mastodon request. Both of these are going to require that you write some sort of CGI for your server. So you're going to have to do some scripting here. This is not stuff that is just out of the box in GemText. This takes a little bit more. Now, depending on the server software you're using, that could happen in any number of programming languages. In the examples I'm going to show you today, I'm just going to do it directly in like, not even Bash, just SH, Bourne Shell. But you can do it in Python or PHP or whatever you're running on your server, as long as your server software allows it with its CGI support. So let's get right into the meat of it. Let's talk about the response code first. So in the specification, in the Gemini spec, let's see, that is over in one of these screens. Here it is. In section 3.2, under status codes, we learn about the 1x response. The status code 1, or 10 mostly, is the input status code. So when a server sends back a 10 as the status to a client, the client then interprets it and says, hey, we're supposed to put some text in here. And the spec says that the meta line is the actual content of the prompt. So if you think about that, that's normally where you have your content type, like text/Gemini or whatever content you're serving. It's also where you can set the character encoding, UTF-8, and I believe that's it. That's the only things you can put in that line, except in the case of a 1x response, we can put something else, and whatever that something else is displayed to the user. So it's a little strange, the fact that we're kind of hijacking the meta line for actual user prompt, but that's how it works. So when we take a look at what that looks like, I'm gonna demonstrate this with a tiny Gemini server that I've got running on Gopher.black. That's my main Gopher hole. I'm running a little Gemini server here, and on the right-hand side, you can see the folder structure. I have an index file, and then I have two folders, one for client cert and one for code 10. We're going to start here at code 10, and we're going to look at this index file in just a second. The base root index Gemini file is over here on the left, and I'm very explicitly doing all of this directly through printf lines in Bourne Shell. So you can see line by line what's happening here. So when you go to my main Gopher.black site, let's do that here. We'll just do AMP4 for that. Gemini Gopher.black. Here it says Gopher.black. Wait, this isn't Gopher. And then we have two different input lines, or two different link lines, rather. So over here, we have that meta line. Now, on this first page, we're giving a response of code 20, which is the 2.0. It's basically, it's the normal okay. Everything's good. Okay. Then I'm saying it's text Gemini, setting my char set, and then we have to end this first line with a carriage return and new line. That's from the spec. We need both right there. Then I'm doing a header. This is go for black, new line. Wait, this isn't go for 2 new lines. And here's my 2 links. One to client cert and one to response code 10. Now, neither of these is showing any difference, right? It's just a regular link. So all of the meat, all of the logic, if you will, is going to happen over here. And we're going to be looking at the query string example first. Oh, sorry. So this is the code that happens inside that page. Now, in bash terms, I'm looking to see if this variable is set or not. If it's not, I'm going to do this. And if it is set, I'm going to do this. Now, what is this variable? Where did this come from? Well, when we looked at the specification, it said that you're going to send back that meta, you're going to send back code 10, but it didn't say how we're going to capture that input. And that actually comes down to the server software. So in my case, I'm using TrueDefault's Gemini Serve or Gemini Serve, GMNI SRV, which I believe he's actually going to put a new Gemini server out pretty soon when his new programming language is wrapped up. He's going to write a new one in that. But for now, this is a very nice, simple Gemini server. And it says right here here it is, for full details on configuration, consult the manual page, and it says the Man 5 page. So I'm going to jump over here. I'm going to jump to my next Tmux window. And this is the configuration file man page for this particular server. I'm going to run on down here because down near the bottom, he has this wonderful section on CGI support. And basically it says, if you have CGI on, these are the variables that are going to be available in your environment when your scripts run. So we're going to be able to see the gateway version, the protocol, server software. It's fine. All that's great. Knowing the script name that we're running, it might be useful for you for whatever you're coding. The path info also could be very good. But what we are most interested in right now is this right here, the query string. Because the way the type 10 works is that input that's getting captured in a type 10, it's going to get captured, and then it's going to be redirected back to the same page after the question mark at the end of the URL. So it's basically the URL to the page you're on, question mark, that input. So great. It's fine. It's how we get it. It's literally a query string. So keep that in mind. That does affect what can be entered there. There's a max character you need to think about, because basically you have your URL plus that, and URLs have a maximum length. So, you can't write a novel in your input. Also, it's a little awkward to write multi-line input in that box anyway. There are a few clients that make it doable. You can shift enter to do multi-lines, and those will get properly URL encoded. But think about that. Everything that you type in there is going to get URL encoded and shoved into the query string. So that's what we're looking for in our script here. So let me go back to our text here. We're looking for literally the variable query string. And if it's not there, this is what we're going to respond with. This is comparable to this line here. So the 20 text Gemini char set, right? And we end in a carriage return new line. Well, in this case, we're going to give a 10 back instead of 20, and none of that other stuff, but we do end in the carriage return new line. And this text, enter your input text, becomes what we're going to see in our interface here. So if I am in Amphora and I hit 2, immediately there was no query text being passed to that script, so it kicked back. And this right here, enter your input text, that is what we saw from right there, enter your input text. So you can put whatever you want here to prompt the user and let them know what they're doing. So I'm going to say James Tomasino. That's me. All right, and I'm going to enter. And input text found, you entered James Tomasino. So the second time this page loads, this time query string is set because we just passed it through. So we're going to set our proper header. We're going to do a little title here, go for black, input text found, and then you entered, and I'm just echoing the query string. Now, like any kind of script that takes user input, you're going to want to make sure that this validates, that you're stripping any kind of injection of horribleness that somebody might be doing. What I'm doing here, don't do that. I'm going to take this page down before this video goes up. But that's kind of how it works. You're going to process this. So that's cool. You can take basic input, and this is how a lot of people are building their comment systems on their Gemini capsules. Just take the user input and echo it to a file somewhere, and then when you load it, you can just kind of concatenate that to the end of your gem text for that particular entry, and now you have comments. It's pretty simple, right? Now, what about this other thing, client certificates? Now, these are a little fancy, right? Because now we're talking about the TLS certificate that is being made in your Gemini client. It could have any number of fields in it. Common name is a pretty common one where people are putting like a name for that, like an identifier for that certificate, but they're not required. So really, the only thing that's actually required is the certificate itself. So when we think about that, when we go look at client certificates, certificate, now we're dealing with these response codes here, 60 or 61. 60 is the main one. Basically, everything that we've done for response code 10, we can do for response code 60 and deal with the client certificate. So instead of a user input, it's a client certificate input. If it's there, we process and give them a 20. If it's not there, process, give it a 60, and it'll prompt the browser, the Gemini client, by saying, hey, we need a client certificate. Now for this, I'm not going to use Amphora. Let's jump over here to Crystal. All right, so this is the same page again. Go for black. If I do my response code 10, all right, it knows that I have a certificate for this site already, so it's going to prompt me. All right, my user input here is something awesome. You know what? / doom sprinkles. Let's see what happens with some special characters. What else can I do here? And some Unicode. And that does come out kind of as is. So Drew's client is doing a nice job for me and decoding that URL. But if you look up top here, something awesome, doom sprinkles, you can see it's fully URL encoded up here. But what I'm working with has been decoded for me already. Your mileage may vary depending on your server. So read your server specs to figure out how you're dealing with these to make sure that you're doing it the right way. Okay. Now let's come back here and look at the client cert example. Now I'm going to run through this real quick. I'm just going to click this. An automatic client cert was detected. That's Crystal is detecting that I have a certificate for this site already. Let's not automatically load, but I'm going to show you what that looks like. So this is my test cert here. And if I select it, yes, a key, you are, and then there's this SHA right here. So let's take a look at what that is. So that on the right-hand side is the query string example we just used. But On the left-hand side is the equivalent for your client certificate. Now you'll see they're structured almost identically. I'm looking here for the TLS client hash. Again, where did that come from? Well, in my particular server, if I scroll down to my variables that are my environment variables that are available to me in CGI, the TLS client hash, here's an example, is a unique fingerprint of the client certificate. This is the most useful thing that I can use to identify a client cert. There are other elements of it that I can get. There is a way to get the remote user, which is the common name of the certificate. But as I mentioned, they're not required, so it's not reliable. Some people built their client systems or their chat programs based on that. They're like, hey, use a client certificate with a common name, and now when you connect to my page, I'm going to give you an ongoing series of type 10 inputs, and that's going to be like your chat program. And every time you enter and hit enter, it'll echo what you chatted plus whatever anybody else had chatted. And boom, now you've got like basically a chat room, right? But if you can't rely on the common name being there, then there's no point in using the common name, right? Instead, I would focus on using the hash of the client certificate for an identification purposes, and then use your type 10 input. You see, you have a unique ID basically at this point. The TLS client hash is a unique ID to that client certificate. Nobody else is going to have that. What you don't have is a username. You don't have an identity, that you can address the user by. So prompt them for that. After your first login, check. Look it up in your database. Does this hash exist in my database? No. Bam, new record. Okay. Does that new record have a name field? If not, prompt it for a 10. And you could do a whole user sign up this way, just with a cycle of type 10 or of response code 10s prompting for each thing. Maybe you only need the name, so you auto prompt for that. And then, in your menu, you could have a thing that says, set your desired setting for, I don't know, whatever it might be. Maybe you're a user of a CLI based Gemini client and you like when sites have colors. Then maybe you want to, have a setting that says enable, VT100 escape codes in my in my output, or whatever it could be. Maybe it's more of a social network that you're putting together. Maybe you want to actually capture some data for people about like what time zone are you in. I don't know. Whatever it is, you have an ID, and that's it. Everything else you're going to have to ask for. You're going to have to ask for it explicitly, and I wouldn't overwhelm a user with it at startup, but that's up to you. That's how you do it. And once again, let me kind of show you what these two things look like. If this is not set, I respond with a 60. And in this case, I'm giving it Text Gemini, Charset UTF-8, although I'm not actually responding with Text Gemini. I'm responding with nothing. So technically, I could get rid of that, really just get rid of everything to that. Because I'm just responding with a 60. That's what's going to tell the Gemini client I need a client or a client certificate. When I do have it, then I can process it. I can use that TLS client hash variable as I need for identification, probably for a database lookup. And then I could do some really cool stuff with it. So it's really similar to the 10, but it's still a little bit of this, load once, then reload kind of prompt actions. Yeah, and that's about it. Now, let's see here. The last thing I wanted to do, I said, show an example. Do I have Astrobotany in here? I don't think I do. Let's go to Medusa. And let's search. So here's an example of something that's going to use a type 10 for me. I'm going to search by capsule title. And look, we just got a type 10 response. Enter the characters you'd like. Astrobotany. Okay. And you can see it reloaded that exact same page, and that is now the query string. So if I go to Astrobotany, I haven't been here in a while. All right, let me see. Settings. And where is this? This is Astrobotany. Astrobotany, revoke trust. Okay. And refresh. Okay, so Astrobotany, beautiful site if you've never been here before. This was one of the first sites that popped up, one of the first capsules that popped up and used client certificates in a really cool way. So Astrobotany login, I'm going to go here and it's going to say immediately select your client cert. Well, I don't have one yet for Astrobotany, so let's make one. I'll leave it in the test group. This one, display name is going to be Gopher Black. Common name, Gopher Black. Actually, you know what? Display name, let's call this one Astrobotany. My common name will be Gopher Black. Astrobotany uses common name for their UI. Now, for the expiration date, I think this thing has a... No, does it not have a fancy thing? We're going to let this go till for the next 10 years. Say OK. We're going to use that. And now we're in the app and it says, hey, we're going to register. All right, this client certificate was not recognized. So they have this little new user process as well. I could link it to an existing user if I wanted, but I'm going to register this certificate as a new user. And perfect. So they learned they're not using the common name anymore. They're asking me for a name. So I'm going to call, let's just name my name, Eno, hello. And now I'm into the app. I'm on that same page, but it's walking me through that kind of user setup using the whole, application flow logic is pinging the database and seeing what do I need next? Do I have everything, etc. Now that I'm in here, I have the option to customize some things, some account settings, audio, synth, badge collection, all of these things sound really cool. So I can use emojis, hide emojis. Let's see, convert emojis to text strings. I think we're going to leave it on. I could set an extra password. Oh, so if I wanted to register new client certificates in case I wanted to use two different Gemini clients that have different certificates, maybe on different devices, but have them linked to the same place, I can set a password that will let me merge these accounts from multiple certificates and have basically multi-machines logging into one account. So I guess if you think about it, if you take a step back and you look at what we have here, we have response code 10 and we have the client certificate. And just with those two things, we can actually create a pretty robust system. ANSI color support. Yeah. And we can make a cool game. So Astrobotany, if you've not played it before, you visit your plant and I have a seed. His name is Justin. If I come back here each day, I can water my plant. And as long as I don't go away for too many days, he will grow up over time. And it's basically a Tamagotchi. Once he gets really old, I'll be able to harvest him and I can get a new generation and I'll get a little growth multiplier. And it'll be pretty cool. So, just come back and check all the time. You can also go to the community garden and see other people's plants. Let's see, let's show the healthy ones. Healthy garden plants. So here's some people's plants and their different levels that they're doing. We could go back, let's see. If we wanted to, we could see some, I think it's under community garden. Show all, show try, wilted, Ted. Now there's a way to see the oldest plant here, and I cannot remember how to do it. Anyway, it's a pretty cool app, but it's all Gemini, and it's using the same two techniques that we just looked at. So, learn what Gemini software you're using. If you are using somebody else's hosting, make sure that they have CGI enabled before you try to do all of this. I think most of the Tilde servers that have Gemini hosting do have CGI enabled, so you should be able to do this stuff here. And yeah, make some apps, do some fun stuff, and enjoy yourselves. All right, thanks for tuning in. Bye.